next time. All right, let me look at a few more questions. Hackathon will be open until 2nd September, so don't worry. Even if the submissions are closed right now, we'll reopen them. So you're good to go. Alrighty. Someone created a to-do application in Express that they sent. Looks pretty good. All right. Cool. You have 3 more days for the hackathon in case you're still thinking of submitting it. Or if you were late, we'll reopen the submissions. You can go from there. I'm sharing my screen. I'm also sharing the slides for today. Today is, I wouldn't call it too hard of a class, but at the same time, really depends on your level. Let me paste this in chat. The class is on this thing called middlewares. Well, that's the hard thing. The class will cover a few things. Everything from here to here. As always, if you understand all of this, feel free to drop off. Or maybe target the assignments over here. There are a few assignments here. Feel free to do them and drop off if you already know this. If not, this is what we had covered last week, and some of this is what I'll try to cover today. Goal is quickly in the first 10 weeks we're able to finish the MERN stack that includes MongoDB, Express, and React, and Node.js you already know. So these 3 things. Hopefully in the next 1.5 week, maybe the next 2 weeks, basically, we should be able to cover everything minus React, and then React will probably take 3 to 4 weeks. So yeah, goal is by the end of 10 weeks, MERN stack is ready. You can build your projects. There are some very kiddie open source projects that you can understand, or at least begin to understand. And then from there, we amp up the pace. Uske baad we cover nothing too much, Postgres, Prisma, some extra technologies. Jiske baad you can actually build everything in the MERN stack. Then we dive into next and go from there. Okay? That's a high level agenda for the upcoming weeks. Today is everything you see from here to here. Basically a few things we had missed in HTTP last week, and middlewares, which is the next slightly hard concept to digest. So we'll see how many. I hope some of you saw the offline video that covers this in a very hand-holdy fashion. Today we'll just look at code and try to understand it using the code, and then look at some commonly available middlewares. Okay? 8:03. I think we can start. Let me see if chat or Q&A has anything specific. Usually we start at 8:04. Bookmarks technique, yeah, I still have it. I will do it. Go slow today. I will try. We'll do polls so we can go from there. Assignments are not coming after week 2. They're just not put in this thing. There are some assignments that I talk about, but I'll formalize this and put them on GitHub as well. Alrighty, 8:04. Let's kick things off, folks. Would love to know before the class, as always, how many of you already know everything that's mentioned on the screen? How many of you already understand middlewares, query parameters, headers, fetch API? Okay, most people don't. That is great. So we'll take it slow. 65% don't. 35% already do. So 35%, it will be a slow class. Directly go to the assignments over there, finish them off, do your thing. You don't have to stick around, you can always come off, do your thing. You don't have to stick around, you can always come back to the recorded video. All right, for everyone else, today is some slightly advanced HTTP servers. The reason I say it is advanced is because middlewares will most probably boggle your head a little bit. Last week we understood that you can start plain old Node.js processes. You can write functions like a sum function. You can call that sum function. But you can also create something called HTTP servers. What is an HTTP server? We discussed last week. HTTP servers are ways for a client, which is usually the browser, to communicate with a server. And this server usually, I'll rediscuss what a port is, and it handles the requests that are coming on this port. You send a request to google.com. Even when you are going to google.com here, you are sending a request to a server in the US, New York, Mumbai, wherever. It is responding back with some HTML. This is something we saw last week. If I click on inspect, click on the network tab and refresh, there are many requests that I send to the HTTP to some Google servers. These are those requests. This is request number 1, the very first request that goes out to google.com. If I go to the response, it returns me a bunch of HTML. That is the first request that I send to Google. But there are a bunch of other requests that go out as well. Some of these we will see eventually. But in any website that you go to, if you've ever used the internet, you are just sending HTTP requests to that specific website's owner. Whenever you go to even app.100xdevs.com, you are sending an HTTP request to our servers, which are hosted somewhere in Mumbai. You get back some HTML from there. These are, requests that go out to our servers, by which I mean, the servers that we have hosted. And they also return you some HTML like this. Cool. Hopefully that's straightforward. On a single machine, let's say Mac machine or, Windows machine, whatever machine you have, you can run various HTTP servers. You can run one HTTP server on port 3000. You can run another HTTP server on port 3001. And you can have multiple processes. One might be your app.100xdevs.com code. One might be your projects.100xdevs.com code. A single server can be running multiple Node.js servers. A single machine can be running multiple servers. One handling load on one port, another handling load on another port. Whenever you go to, let's say, projects.100xdevs.com, this doesn't actually happen. What actually happens here is something else. But hypothetically, when you're going to one website, you go to this one process on a machine. When you go to a different website, app.100xdevs.com, you go to a different process on the same machine. And this process returns you the HTML. If you're going to app.100xdevs.com, it returns you this HTML. If you go to projects.100xdevs.com, it returns you this HTML that renders this page. This is a diagram that represents something similar. Okay, on your Mac machine or on a Linux machine, you can run multiple processes. In fact, one of these processes can be in Node.js. The other one can actually be in Golang. You can create an HTTP server in Golang also, in Java also, in Rust also. Spring Boot is the common framework in Java, right? Spring Boot application developer. That is just an HTTP server in Java, similar to how Express is an HTTP server in Node.js. So Kalko, in the future, if you become a Java developer, you might run a similar process in Java that handles incoming requests. The concepts remain the same. Okay, that Golang process or that Java process will be listening on a port. This diagram is incorrect. This should say 3001 over here. This is 3000. This should say 3001. You can't have two processes running on the same port. So this diagram is incorrect. But in the future, if you ever create a Java process that might be running on a different port, on the same machine, you might have multiple processes running. If you want to go to the Node.js process, you will go to, let's say, whatever the IP of that machine is, whatever the IP address of the machine is, :3000. If you want to go to the Golang process, you will go to IP of the machine, :3001. To reach this process, if it was 1 over here, as I said, this diagram is incorrect. It should say 1 over here. If you are ever in college, you might see they send you these URLs. कि यार आपका admin portal is hosted on some random URL like this. This is because, college में whoever is maintaining these, they are not very smart. So they don't understand how can you map this to a domain name like google.com. I repeat, when you're in college, a lot of times ERPs are hosted here rather than on a URL like erp.itr.ac.in. The reason is because a lot of these developers of these internal products, they don't understand how to point a URL to an IP. But in the end, whenever you go to google.com, whenever you go to facebook.com, you are actually going to an underlying IP address. I repeat, if I go to google.com, I am actually going to this underlying IP address. This is a IPv6 IP address, which is why it is harder to read. Let me find one that is IPv4. Let me go to app.100xdevs.com. And here you will see the request goes to 212.2.242.58. This is one of my servers only. This IP address is of one of my servers that I have rented somewhere. This is where I've hosted the application. So this is what we covered last week specifically. We understood domain names and IPs, how google.com is a domain name, under the hood points to an IP. We understood about ports. on a single machine you could have multiple ports. These are logical ports. These are not physical ports. There isn't. This is my Mac machine down here. There isn't a physical port on it. Port doesn't mean कि कुछ physical यहाँ लगा हुआ है. Just a logical number. कि यार on port 3000 this process is running. On port 3001 this process is running. Then we understood about methods. If you remember, we said whenever you are sending a request to Google, Facebook, wherever, you specify a method. You say, here I want to send a, let's refresh this again. I want to send a get request or a post request or a put request or a delete request. If you remember, these request methods are something you specify. The intent of these request methods is कि what are you trying to do on the server? आप करना क्या चाह रहे हो? When I'm going to google.com, I want to get the HTML of this page, right? I want to get the HTML of this page. It returns me the HTML also. Hence, it is a good idea for it to be a get request. I repeat, it is a good idea for it to be a get request. Whenever you hit, let's say you have a to-do application. If you have a to-do application, there are 4 things you might want to do on this. Or if you have even twitter.com, when you go to twitter.com, you either get all the posts or you create a new post or you post a new tweet. You create a new tweet, which is similar to posting. Post in context of HTTP means I want to create something. I want to post something. You might want to edit one of your tweets. You might want to change one of your tweets. That would be a put request or a patch request. You can send a put or a patch request to change a tweet or update a tweet. And you might want to send a delete request to delete a post. In any website, think of any use case, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. Usually these are the 4 things you are doing. You are either fetching some data, you are either adding some data, deleting some data, changing some data. So for that, the HTTP protocol says कि यार specify कर दो. Please specify what do you want to do. Are you trying to update data, delete data? What are you trying to do? So your browser sends that kind of requests. This is what's called a method. And even the server, if this is the twitter.com server, the server also needs to make sure that it has the right handlers. That it has a get handler that handles, fetching of posts. It has a post handler which handles creating posts, so on and so forth. So this isn't a one-sided thing. I can't send a get request to Google if jo Google ka engineer hai, the Google engineer hasn't written a get handler. It is the responsibility of both the sides. It is the responsibility of this twitter.com backend developer to ensure he's following the right norms. He's following. If a get request comes, I need to only return some data, not update anything. If a post request comes, it is ideally for adding some data, so on and so forth. Do you need methods? Not really. You can always say कि यार नहीं, आपको अगर नया tweet भी बनाना है ना, if you want to create a new tweet, then also you send me a get request. If you want to update a tweet, then also send me a get request. So if the developer is a bad developer, then they could make all the endpoints get, but the specification is, if you are a good developer, figure out what exactly this endpoint is doing. Is it trying to create something? Is it trying to read something? Is it trying to update something or delete something? Based on what you're trying to do, the method handler should be different. That is what methods were. We discussed this last week. We wrote some code also. We'll write some code today also. This will become a little more clearer when that happens, in case it wasn't already clear. Responses that a server responds back with. Whenever you send a request to a server, it will send you back some data. We saw it can be HTML, it can be JSON, if you remember from last week. Specifically, if you go to google.com or app.handexters.com, you will see the data is HTML data. It can be plain text data, simple string that says hi there. It can be a JSON object, which, let's see if we can find one. An object that looks like this, a normal JavaScript object. It can be XML, if you've heard of XML. The server could return you any format of the data. Status codes are a way for the server to specify कि सब सही है कि नहीं. If everything is fine, 200 status code. If something went wrong, then 404 status code. We discussed this last week. I'm just recapping it. So if you don't understand this, feel free to go to last week's video. Body. The client can also send some data. The server can respond with some data, in this case with some HTML. The client can also send some data. And if you look at some of these requests here, this payload that you see in any request, for example, this request is what the client sends to the server. So the server can respond back with some data. In this case, it will tell you, okay, all the posts, but the client can also send some data, right? In this case, the client will say, okay, hey, I want to update the tweet with ID 123. I want to set the body of the tweet to be my new tweet. So the client can send some data to the server. Server can respond back with some data. Client can also send plain text data, JSON data, various types of data. Routes, if you remember, this is a route, on this HTTP server, recap-d7 something something. This is one route. If you go to app.netexapps.com/signin, this is the route on, that we're currently on. The route represents, okay, on this server, what specific route are you trying to hit? What specific, thing that are you trying to do? In this case, we are trying to get the HTML of the sign-in page, which is why the route over here is /signin. And lastly, Express we understood, which is a framework. Just like Spring Boot is a framework in Java, Actix Web is a framework in Rust, Express is a framework in JavaScript. There are many other frameworks we'll eventually understand that let you create HTTP servers. Hopefully that is clear, but this is all from last week, so I'm not doing a poll here. What we're learning today is a few things we missed last week. That includes headers and query parameters. These are the two important things we should have discussed last week. We did not because of time. Then we'll do some extra things after that, specifically understand the fetch API, understand about middlewares and some commonly used middlewares. Okay? Without any further ado, let's get right into it. Let's understand headers first. If at this point also you're overwhelmed, you need to go to last week's video. Headers, well, as the name suggests, are some headers that you send to an HTTP server. Whenever you are sending some data to an HTTP server, let me trim this down to something more manageable. Let's say you're trying to update a tweet. Then what all data do you send? You send, hey, I want to send a put request to, let's say, something like this, api.twitter.com/tweet. I want to send a put request to apis.twitter.com/tweet, where this is my body. Body में क्या लिखा है? क्या this ID का जो tweet है ना, the tweet with this ID, I want to change its body to something else. I want to update my tweet. But I can send some extra data along with it. In the headers, what is this? This is the body. What are headers? Headers are some extra metadata. This over here is the body, and headers are some extra metadata that you send. For example, this request came from twitter.com. That is one extra metadata you might want to send. Why do I say extra? Because the request handler doesn't need any of this. उसको इससे फर्क ही नहीं पड़ता. The real meat of your logic, whatever you actually want to do on the server, happens here or is described here. जो भी extra data होता है ना, कुछ random metadata is what you put over here. Let's see an example and maybe understand it a little bit better. When I go to google.com, I don't send any data. It is just a get request. यहाँ पे थोड़ी मैं कोई data भेज रहा हूँ कि यार साथ में username or whatever, country ID, something like this. I'm not sending anything here. I'm simply sending a get request to google.com. But if you notice, if I click on this request, and feel free to try it on your side, right click, inspect, and click on the network tab and go to the first request here. Notice if I scroll down, there are a bunch of response headers and there are a bunch of request headers. Along with the normal things that I sent, here I want to visit google.com, I want to send a get request. There are some request headers that I send, which I am not going to open, because if I open them, then you will be able to log in as me into Google. This has a lot of sensitive data also, lot of authentication data also. Over here, I send to Google के my password ऐसा लगा लो, my Google password is somehow put over here. Well, I'm not signed in here, so it's fine. I can show this. But here you will see a bunch of extra things. Okay, hey, I accept HTML. You are telling the server, whenever you do your thing, please send me back HTML. I only understand HTML and XML. Extra properties. I understand these encodings. I understand this specific English language. And this cookie is what I want to hide from you guys. If you can see over here, which is some authentication data. So what is authentication data? My password laga lo. My Google password is somehow stored over here. The thing that I did not want to show. So these are the things that you send in the headers. Tumhara meat of the logic you send separately. This is my meat of the logic. What I want to do on this tweet endpoint. Some extra things I send in the headers. And the server also responds back with some headers. The server, as you can see, there are some response headers over here. It says whatever these headers are, let me find one if that makes sense. It says the content length is this many bytes. The content that I'm sending you is, this long. The content, all the HTML that came back is this long over here. 57216 characters most probably. Things like these. Any extra metadata that the server wants to respond back, they give in the response header. That you want to send the server, you send in the request headers. HTTP headers are key value pairs. What are key value pairs? क्या एक key है और एक value है. इस header की key है authority. Value is google.com. Key is method. Value is get. Key is path. Method is slash. So on and so forth. Sorry, value is slash. So they are key value pairs sent between a client and a server in an HTTP request or response. Request भेज रहे हो तो आप भेजोगे. Response आ रहा है, then it will come back from the server. They convey the metadata about the request, such as the content type, some authentication information. Just like I said, there's a cookie in there which has some, my Google password somehow. So these are the things, the extra things that you send in headers. Some common headers include cookie or this authorization header. We will get to what this is, but this has my Google password. Think of it. If I was logged in here, it would show me my profile picture, right? If I was logged in Google, I would see my profile picture here. So how does the server know this is Harkirat? I am sending to the server in these request headers my Google password somehow. So the server understands that this is Harkirat, and the HTML that it returns, usme there is a circle over here with my profile picture. So one thing that to send in a header from the client is the authorization information, the content type. Okay, what kind of data am I sending? Am I sending you textual data, JavaScript data, JSON data, XML data? And the referrer is another thing, from where is this request coming from? If you look at all of these requests, they are all coming from google.com. If you don't understand this, don't worry about this. We're coming to this very soon in a bunch of upcoming slides. But another common header is the referrer, which means where is this request coming from? Which in this case, all of these requests are coming from where? Google.com. Basically means the user was on this website when they sent this request. And then similarly, as I said, there are some response headers, request headers, referrer, the one that I mentioned, very recently, this one right here. If you look at any one of these requests over here, and I'm trying to hide my referrer is google.com because this request went out from this browser on google.com. And response headers, as I said, there are many. One of them, for example, being the content type that the server responded with. In this case, the server responded with HTML content. How are these headers sent from the server, from the client is a different question. The easiest test you can do is open Postman. And in Postman, itself, whenever you're sending a request, you will see there's a headers section. So in Postman, you can describe the method. We already discussed the method, the URL, the route, the port, the body, and the headers, which is the new thing we are learning right now. Body mein we are sending the actual data. Headers mein we are sending some metadata. For example, we are sending कि हमारा content type is JSON. The data that I am sending you, server, it is of type JSON, or more specifically, you have to mention application/JSON. And if you look at the body, It indeed is JSON. मैं सर्वर को JSON भेज रहा हूँ. I am sending JSON to the server. I am telling the server in the headers कि यार the data that is coming to you right is in JSON. Because how does the server know? उसको क्या पता कि is this a string that looks like this or is this a JavaScript object? So I tell it कि this is a JavaScript object that I am sending you. Don't parse this as a very long string. This is not a very long string that I am sending you. I am sending you a proper JSON object. You mention it here in the headers. Do we understand headers? Let's do a quick poll. Oh boy. So we don't. So we will take a pause. Little early in the class today. I'm going to look at Q&A and answer it for 4 or 5 minutes. Let's see if we can try and understand. Quick recap. Recordings are available. Header visible in the URL of a website. The header isn't visible in the URL of a website. I haven't written $content type equal to JSON over here. The header goes along with it. Just like the payload goes along with it, or the body goes along with it, the request headers go along with it. Quick recap. I will recap. What does it even mean to say that someone is directing the port for local development? Also, if many developers are accessing the same port for their local development, will their changes reflect in other developers? No. So you are a little confused. If there are many developers like you and me are on a team, this is my Mac machine that I'm currently typing on. This is your Mac machine. Let's say your Windows machine where you are, attending this class. Wherever I'm doing local development, I am running my Node.js process here on port 3000 on my machine. This Node.js process is running on my machine. This Node.js process that you might also be running, let's say you are also a developer on the same team, this is running on your machine. When in my browser over here, I go to localhost :3000, this request goes to my machine's 3000 server, my Node.js process. And similarly over here, it will go to your machine. So if you have some changes here, I have some changes here. I am seeing my changes, you are seeing your changes. This is true for not just HTTP servers, but any application. Let's say you and I are working on some very simple application that is not an HTTP server, a calculator. तो तुम्हारे code changes तो तुम्हें यहाँ दिखेंगे ना. You will see your local calculator, I will see my local calculator. Eventually we push code, I push my code, you push your code to GitHub. That is a whole different story. We push our changes over to GitHub from where they reach, our AWS machine. But during local development, I hope this is clear. I will see my changes, you will see your changes. Recap, simple way. Okay. Let me recap everything in a more simpler way. We understand HTTP servers, hopefully. This is google.com HTTP server. Okay. This is my browser. Let's say I want to visit many pages on google.com. मुझे बहुत सारे pages को visit करना है. I want to visit google.com. Then, I will search something here. Then I will send another request to, this very long URL. Let me copy some parts of this. पहले I send a request to google.com, the landing page. Then I sent a request to this, search endpoint that actually searches Google. Notice this is also a GET request. Let's confirm that. If I go here and refresh, this very first request is a GET request. I am not sending any extra data in here. I sent what I want to search somehow. I wanted to search ASD. I sent that in the URL. But did I send कि I am Harkirat? क्या इस पूरे URL में do you see somewhere that I am sending my authentication information? No. If I go to the landing page, I am simply sending a request to google.com. Did I say username equal to harkirat@gmail.com and password equal to, let's say, 123? I am not sending this information. I am not putting this in the URL. Then how is the server receiving that this is Harkirat? How does the server, if I was logged in return me the HTML जहाँ पे यहाँ profile picture बनी होती. The answer is that information is sent in the headers. Browser sends it automatically. The browser automatically sends my authentication information in these request headers. यहाँ पे ये जो cookie आपको दिख रहा है, this cookie that you see, this has my username and password somehow, using which the server understands कि अच्छा this is Harkirat, and it returns me my profile picture over here. So whenever you want to send some auxiliary data, something you want to send with every request, something you don't want the developer to explicitly describe over here, those are sent in the headers, both from the client and from the server. कभी-कभी the server will also send you some information. For example, things like कि मैं जो तेरे को लौटा रहा हूँ, the things that I'm returning you, this HTML that I'm returning you, the content length of this HTML, the content length of this HTML is this much. So the server and the client sometimes want to send some extra data, what is called metadata. They send those in the headers. जो भी extra information they want to send for a bunch of requests, that is sent in these headers over here. The browser also sends them. If I go to Postman, यहाँ पे also I can add a bunch of random headers. Username harkirat@gmail.com and password, let's say 123123. So here I am trying to send to the server some extra metadata that I don't want the developer to keep writing again and again. If you look at it, ये सब by default जा रही हैं. These are going by default. All the requests that go out somehow have these headers. If you look at all the requests, they have these request headers. They get attached by default. If you look at it, this has the cookie also. If I look at a different request, that has the cookie also. So my cookie is getting attached by default in the headers, so that in every request the server knows that this is Harkirat. What is a cookie? It is similar to this, me sending my Google username and password to the server. This information is sent in the headers. The actual thing you want to do, let's say this is a to-do application, or this is Google, so this is a search application. The actual thing you can send over here. Whatever you want to search for, whatever the search query is on Google. Now, do we understand the difference between headers and body? Can we proceed? Key value pairs between a client and a server, they convey about metadata. They convey the metadata such as the content type, authentication information, things like these. Few people understand, few people don't. I will recap this after the class. We will not use headers at all from here to here. So don't worry about headers. I'll recap this after the class. Let's proceed. And I'm happy to dive deeper into headers again or release an offline video on them. All right. ठीक है जी. Coming to some interesting bits. More specifically the fetch API. This is important. Let me recap. अभी तक class में it's been almost 30 minutes. And what have we done? Number one, we recapped about HTTP. जितनी चीजें हमें समझ आई, whatever we could understand. We learnt about headers. We don't understand them yet, but that is fine. We will be learning about them again at the end of the class, and we won't need them until the end of the class. ठीक है? The next thing we are going to learn about is something called the fetch API. This is important. So bear with me for like the next 5 minutes. There are two high-level ways a browser can send requests to an HTTP server. There are high-level पे दो तरीके से you send a request. When I went to google.com, I sent a request to an HTTP server. It gave me the HTML. But there were a bunch of background requests that also went out. If you remember, अगर मैं google.com पे जाता हूँ, if I go to google.com, there wasn't a single request that went out. When I go to google.com, how many requests go out? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So many requests are going out, right? The first one I sent myself. All the others, some of them being, to get a JavaScript file, some of them being to get a GIF, some of them to, get an image, so on and so forth. They went down in the background. Question is, how can you send these background requests? This too seems very important. Only one request that was sent from the browser. All the other requests were sent in the background. How can you send these background requests on an HTML page? That is what we're trying to understand. Okay, given that I visit a website, I get back its HTML, but seems like somehow from the HTML, you can keep hitting HTTP servers. How can you hit HTTP servers from within a website in the background? What do I mean in the background? I mean it isn't that first request that gave you the HTML. It is some underlying requests that can happen after 2 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. It can happen after I click on a button. If I go to LinkedIn, initially I get some, if I go to LinkedIn here, I'm not logged in at all. Initially I get some HTML that shows me, let's say 10 posts, but as I scroll, I get more posts. So I'm sending more HTTP requests under the hood. If I look at the network tab, notice not a lot of requests right now. Let me clear everything. Not a lot of requests, but as I scroll, can you see more and more requests going out here? Let me move this to the side. Oh God, this becomes so long. Can you see more and more requests that go out? As I scroll, let me again clear this. As I scroll, more requests go out. In the background of this HTML, I ask for more posts, give me more posts, give me more posts, and then I show them to the user over here. How can you send this background request? In the end, you will be creating websites like these only. You will be creating a website like LinkedIn. How is it happening? As you scroll or on some, event being me scrolling down, more requests go out to a backend server. The answer is by using this fetch API that the browser provides you. The browser provides you some functions, right? The browser provides you the set timeout function. Similarly, it provides you the set interval function. It provides you the fetch function, which you can use to fetch something from an HTTP server. You can use this function that the browser provides you by default to send a request to a server, get back the response. Let's try it out. Let's say this is the backend of Twitter. As you can look at it, it returns you a user ID, an ID, a title, and a body. It sort of returns you a post or a LinkedIn post. This is the title of the LinkedIn post. This is the body of the LinkedIn posts. How can we send an underlying request, send a background request? If this is a website that I go to, ये एक website है, let's say, your own website, call it linkedinharkirath.com. After this website loads, after the HTML comes over here, how can you in the background send a request to this, JSON placeholder server, get back the response and render the response over here, put the response over here. Okay, this is the very first, let's say, post of the user. That is what we're trying to understand right now. For that, we will have to create a quick website. This is the code that we will have to write, right? ये code तो already लिखा हुआ है. This code is already written. This is the code that we have to write. Let's create a quick HTML file and try to write the code that sends a background request. So feel free to do it locally on your machine or on Replit. I'm going to do it on Replit. So feel free to follow along if you want to do it here. If you want to do it locally, that works as well. Create REPL and select HTML. What did I do? I went to Replit, logged in, and created a fresh HTML, CSS, and JavaScript REPL. I hope we know what this is by now. This is the HTML code. If I run this code, it renders over here. If I change this to something else, the other thing renders over here. What do I want? I want to show the posts of that come from that endpoint. I repeat, I want to show the one post that comes from that endpoint. What is that endpoint? Let me send the slide link again for the people who joined late. That endpoint is this. This is like a random website called JSON placeholder, as you can guess. It returns you some placeholder JSON. It's like a dummy website that you can use. So यहाँ पे, if I send a request here, it returns me this JSON data. So can I somehow send that request here in the background? The answer is yes. How? How can I create a small clock over here? Harkirath, by using the set timeout function. How can I create, an alert over here? Harkirath, by calling alert hi there. When I use the browser provided alert function, and when I run this, what happens? An alert pops up that says hi there. Why does that happen? Because code runs from here to here. Posts render over here. ये script tag run होता है, this alert function runs. That is how the alert pops up. Now if I run this fetch and give it this specific URL, let's say I just run this much, ठीक है? I say here fetch all the data from here. Will it send a request in the background to the server? Let's see. What did I do? Fetch and then the URL from which I want to fetch the data. Right click, inspect, go to the network tab. I have it open here on the left. Let me click on run over here. Notice amongst the many requests that went out, there is a request that went out to this request that went out to JSON placeholder.typecode.com/post/1. It was a background request that went from here to that server. What is a background request? All the requests on google.com that come after the initial request. Initial request went from the browser. That is not a background request. But all the requests that come after this, ye sari ki sari, these requests are background requests. How can we send the same from our website? If this is my website like google.com or LinkedIn, the way to send a request to an HTTP server and get the response from it is this fetch function. Can we do a quick poll and see, do you understand calling it? How can you get the data? How can you render it here? Is a different question. But do we understand that ये browser provided function है, you use that function, it sends a request to the back, to whatever HTTP server you want to call. All right. Let's do a very small 2-minute Q&A. For everyone else, try to finish the assignment. For 2 minutes, I'm going to look at Q&A and understand what's the problem over here. Recap. When we are sending JSON data from client, we don't need to specify the content type. But when we are sending photos, we need to mention separately for headers. Even when you're sending JSON data from the client, you should specify the content type, else your server will get confused. So if you are not specifying the content type, you're doing it wrong. You should specify it is JSON that you're sending. What if we don't accept cookies? What do you mean don't accept cookies? If the server doesn't accept cookies, the server will. Google लिखा ही ऐसे गया. Whoever has written the server of Google says कि whatever cookies are coming, based on that I will decide who this user is. 2-minute recap once again in an easy way. Please explain again why AK not answering my question. All right, let me explain this. Fetch and get में क्या फर्क है? Fetch and get में बहुत फर्क है. This is a function that the browser gives you. What is set timeout? A function that the browser gives you. And if you use this function, then this is a complicated function. You get the idea. Alert is a function that the browser provides you. Iska kaam kya hai? What is the goal of this alert function? To alert something on the screen. If I run this, it says hi there over here. This fetch function also the browser provides you. If I go to my console over here, I can type fetch and it tells me that fetch ek function hai proper. This is the body of that fetch function. It does something under the hood. Similarly, alert is a function. Set timeout is a function. Each one of these functions has a job. Fetch specifically has the job of sending a request to the backend. It accepts more things like the method. Do you want to send a get request? Do you want to send a post request? The headers, cookie, let's say, something. And the body that you want to send. Everything you can specify here. We are doing a very simple version, which is why I just wrote fetch followed by this. But you can actually, describe your request here. Kya mujhe ye body bhejni hai, which is JSON. I want to send these headers. I want to send a post request and not a get request. Everything you can specify as the second argument. If you don't specify anything, by default, it is a get request. So fetch and get are different. Fetch is a function. अगर आपने ये call कर दिया, then it will send an HTTP request to a server, get back a response. What is the goal of this? इसका purpose क्या है? Purpose is कि if you ever create a LinkedIn-like website, as the user scrolls, you send more HTTP requests, get back the latest posts, render them here. User scrolls a little bit more, send an HTTP request, get back a response, render it over here. Just how LinkedIn does it, we are trying to do the same thing. We are sending a fetch request, getting back some response. Question is, how can you use that response? आपने send तो You sent a request, you got back a response. How can you use that? That is the next question. The answer, as you can guess, is, this fetch function will return you something. It will return you some response, and somewhere in this response, you will find this JSON data. Whatever this JSON data, this URL returns, आपको कहाँ मिलेगा? In whatever this specific fetch function returns. What does the fetch function return? Now this returns a promise, which is going to confuse some people again. The people who don't understand promises until now. This returns a promise. So what you want to do is await on that promise. I repeat, if I define a function here, call it get recent post. I defined a function. I called it get recent post. And I made it an async function. Now the people who don't know async await, you will have to go back to the async await class. People who don't know promises, fetch returns a promise. You await on that promise to get a response. Why does this return a promise? Because this request goes to a server. It literally, when you are running this function, when you write this function call, क्या हो रहा है? This is your browser, and it is literally sending a request from, a bunch of routers all around the world, a bunch of wires to a server in, let's say, the US. Then the server processes that request and returns you back the data from, all of these routers, and the data finally reaches you. This doesn't happen immediately. This could take 2 seconds, 3 seconds, up to 10 seconds, which is why, or 20 seconds also. Which is why you have to await this. कि यार ये immediately तो नहीं return करने वाला. Await for this data to come. And whenever this data comes in this response variable, you can log that data, can put that data over here. The way to do that is also a little complicated. So one more line of code you will have to bear with me. And it will become very easy eventually when we use a different library. But one more thing you have to do is, कि यार ये जो data आया है, I need to convert this into JSON. I repeat, I need to convert this response into JSON. This is again a place where people get very confused. So this fetch request can return you any type of data, HTML, textual data, XML data, JSON data. What is it returning? In our case, it is returning JSON data. So this second function call over here says, क्या इसको please JSON में convert कर दो. You could also do .text. If you think this is returning you plain text data, तो आप कहते हैं भाई whatever the response is returning, please convert it into plain text. But in our case, we know it is returning us some JSON data. So we say, यार इसको please JSON में convert कर दो. Please convert this into JSON. And this also is an async function. Even though it doesn't send a network call, it is still an async function. It does something which I always get confused by. Why exactly? This doesn't need to be an async function, right? Actually, someone in code 2 said it does for some reason. But this does return a promise, which means you have to await this as well. This also does some asynchronous operation to somehow from this response convert whatever response came over to JSON. And then you get the data. Let me just alert this or log this data for now. And then we'll take a pause, we'll take a breather. I think we did too many things here. I don't know, you can tell maybe not. Let me call this function. And let's see if some data gets logged or not. If I run this, if I open the dev tools, notice something got logged at least. ये console.log लगता है हो गया. Let me put a few more logs. Console.log before sending request. Console.log request has been processed. If I run it again, what gets logged first? Before sending request. This gets logged. उसके बाद क्या हो रहा है? I'm running 2 lines of code. If this feels confusing, very soon we will make this slightly easier. Okay, why are there 2 steps? Why can't a single step return me the final JSON data? We'll get to this very soon in the next 10 minutes. You first fetch the data. The data can be of many types: HTML, XML, plain text data, JSON data. We know it is JSON data, which is why we have to await converting it into JSON. When it gets converted into JSON, you get the data here, you log it over here. What is the last step? Is putting the data over here. Can you guess how to do that? Given you already have the data, how can you put it over here? How can your user see the recent posts over here? By doing DOM manipulation, right? Div ID equal to posts. Create an empty div over here. And यहाँ पे simply put the post document dot get element by ID posts dot inner HTML equal to data dot, let's say, body. This body is what I will put in this posts section over here. Now if I run it, you will see initially only LinkedIn comes. Eventually my post comes here as well. I did a few things. Let me take a pause and see how many you were able to understand. But to recap, what did I do? I defined a function called get recent posts. I called that function. What does the function do? It sends the request in the background to an HTTP server, gets back a response. एक बार वो response आ गया, it converts that response into JSON, and you can log that data if you want, or you can dump that data onto the DOM. तुम्हें वो data मिल गया in a variable. You can put that data onto the document, this HTML page over here, by doing something we have already done in the past. This we have already done. How can you put some data on the HTML? That is what this line of code over here does. Document.getElement by ID posts will get this empty div right here. And what do we say? कि इसके inner HTML को data.body कर दो. Please convert its inner HTML to data.body. What the server returned at us. Can we do a quick poll and see how we're doing? Oh boy, things are getting hard, huh? Very quickly they're getting hard. Oh boy. What am I missing? Why is this so hard? 82%. It's fine. I mean, we'll take a break or whatever. Anyway, it's time for a break. Let's take a 8-minute break. Let me answer a few questions. What exactly is hard here? And it's totally fine for it to be hard. We have been able to reach here, and we'll probably just do this much today. Probably have to do Middle West tomorrow. Let me look at Q&A and try to answer a few questions, and then we'll go from there. What is JSON placeholder? यार ये तो एक random website है. This is a random website that returns you random posts. If I go to /post/1, it returns me a random post. If I go to /post/2, it returns me a random post in some weird language. So ये तो एक random website है, एक dummy website है that we are using just to test कि can we hit various servers. I could have also replaced this with google.com if I wanted. Yeah, let's see what Google returns. And can you guess what Google returns? Google returns you HTML. If I send an HTTP request to google.com, it will most probably block it if I send it from here. But if I sent a request to google.com, it returned me HTML. मैंने कहा यहाँ से भेजते हैं ना वो request. Let's send that request from here so that we get the response in a variable. और फिर इस variable को we can use to do 10 different things. In simple words. Why console.log requesting process console at the end, even if it is a synchronous function? In the other await, fetch, and JSON promise, okay, you're a little confused. The reason this logged at the end is because I awaited these requests. I have not done this. Okay, fetch dot then data. And then data is equal to just response.json dot then whatever data, and then this thing. If I would have done this, then what you're saying is right. Then this will get logged first and this data will get logged later. This is the exact difference between the async await syntax and the promisified dot then syntax. If I use the dot then syntax, if I do this, it will do the exact same thing. I'm saying कि fetch करो, whenever that succeeds, then call this, make sure the control reaches here, and whenever the response.json, this async operation succeeds, then make the control reach here. For the people who are confused, we'll do a doubt session today at the end. No worry, we'll take it slow. In this case, yes, पहले ये log होगा, then this will get logged, and then eventually the control will reach here. That is what will happen in this case. But the way that we had written the code, it used the async await syntax. Async await syntax when you actually wait. When you say fetch, you don't actually, wait, that's a weird term. Okay. The code that I've written over here, right, is the same as me writing this. If you remember, I said async await is just syntactic sugar for the dot then syntax. Ye under the hood gets converted into ye. I repeat, this under the hood gets converted into this. And yahan pe, of course, this gets logged in the end, right? Where is this getting logged? This console.log is happening after the console.log data. So first this will get logged. We will send a background request. When that succeeds, control will reach here. We will convert it into JSON. When that succeeds, control will reach here. Data will get logged. This will get logged in the end. The same thing will happen here. This under the hood gets converted to this only. Ye sara ka sara, all three of these reach the final response.json.then. If I am awaiting on this, if I am awaiting on response.json, iska matlab is the same as कि जब ये हो जाएगा, whenever this is done, I'm going to take all of this and do it afterwards. That is why this gets logged in the end. But if you are right in thinking कि अगर मैं ये करता, if this log would have been present here, then yes, this will get logged first, and then eventually these will get logged. But this log is present after this console.log data, which is why it gets logged in the end. Why use fetch over get method? There is no get method unless I'm missing something. What do you mean get method? Is there a get method? There is no get method. What do you mean get method in JavaScript? There's a fetch method in JavaScript that lets you fetch data. It also lets you specify do you want to send a get request or do you want to send a post request? But there is no get method in JavaScript or in the browser more specifically. Why is there a need for making background requests? When I go to linkedin.com, पहली request ने आपको ये HTML return कर दिया. The first request returned you this HTML. As I scroll down, where is the rest of this coming from? अभी तो पेज पे कुछ था ही नहीं. This page has some data. Let's say that all that data came in the first request. As I'm scrolling down, how are more things getting appended? I am asking for more data, right? I have to send a background request. Okay, please give me more posts. I am getting the new posts and then I'm rendering them over here. That is why you have to keep sending background requests. What happened with this guy? Why is everyone so... I don't know. Something he did right. I have no idea. Okay, let's see. Q&A. Response.json part. Response.json is confusing. A lot of people get confused with this. Let me give you a high level before we proceed to the better implementation of or easier implementation of this, which is Axios. Very soon we will be reaching Axios, and we'll understand why that's easier. But long story short, this response.json, whatever response you got from the server, it could be anything. In this case, it is, like a JavaScript object, but it could have been plain text. यहाँ पे hi there भी लिखा हो सकता था. It could have been a very big HTML. You need to tell कि यार मुझे data दे in this specific format. In our case, we are telling कि response तो you got, please convert it into JSON. Await on it because this does return a promise. ये आपको एक promise ही return करता है. It doesn't synchronously convert it into JSON. It converts it asynchronously. Even though this is not sending a network request. ये तो it is sending a network request. So it makes sense to await it. यहाँ पे there is no network request. Still you have to await it. It still returns a promise. You can look at the actual implementation of this function to see why it returns a promise and why not. And hence you have to await it. Then you get actual JSON data in this data variable. But we will very soon, do something that will make it a little easier. Fetch और Axios में क्या use करना अच्छा होगा? Axios, अच्छा, but there is no अच्छा और बुरा, but Axios is just easier syntax. I guess it's a combination of few topics, hence I'm unable to get it. If you have not done last week, then you should, it should be a little, okay, why data.body? Because यहाँ पे I have 4 keys, right? user ID, title and body. I want to print this over here. यहाँ पे मुझे क्या डालना है? अगर मुझे ID डालनी होती है तो I would have put, data.id. If I say data.id, then what gets logged here? Failed to fetch. Oh, I sent google.com. If I put data.id here, the ID should get logged over here. Sorry, user ID. Oh no, ID is also there. We'll see. Undefined because method is post. Let me make it get. If I put data.user_id here, यहाँ पे 1 आ जाता है because I'm picking this key. If I put data.title here, then what will come over here? Just the title. If I put the whole data, the one thing you have to do if you put the whole data is this. You need to convert it into a string, otherwise you'll see something weird. So if you do this, then I will see the whole very big object over here. So it depends what I want to render over here. Do I just want to render the user ID? Just want to render the ID, title or the body? That is why, data.body. You're not doing anything hard. It's easy. I don't know why it's hard for someone. I don't know why coding is still easy. I think they are just trolling. That would be so super weird. Troll usually happens like 5%. Please go a little more slow when you are teaching a new topic. Yeah, very disjoint opinions. All right, it's 9:02. We have to proceed. Someone added a link for why response awaits, which I will read eventually. All right. When did we discuss async await? Week 1 or week 2, something like that. All righty. Cool hai bhai log. Some people got very confused with this syntax. So let's look at a slightly easier syntax. We have understood the concept of external libraries. Thoda. We understood FS is one library. Express is an external library. If you remember, we understood about this commander library. Similarly, there is this library called Axios, AXIOS, which just makes the syntax of sending a request slightly easier. जब आप request भेजते हो एक backend को, when you send a request to a backend, this is not too hard of a syntax, but still I can get if some people feel it is hard, which is why this is a slightly easier syntax. What you can do is use this library called Axios. What is Axios? It is just an external library. If you go to Axios http:/docs/intro, what does it say? Promise-based HTTP client for browser and Node.js. What does it say? Okay, it is a HTTP client, not an HTTP server. What is an HTTP server? Express. What is an HTTP client? Fetch is sort of an HTTP client. It is sending a request to a server, getting back the data. Similarly, Axios is an HTTP client, but ये browser में natively नहीं होता. Browser में it is not present natively in the browser like fetch. It is an external library. So to be able to use this, you first have to bring that external library into your code base. How can you do that? In Node.js, there is a different way. You require, if you remember, in case of HTML, CSS and JavaScript, you can just get all the code of that specific library from a link like this. If I go to cdnjs.cloudflare.com/ajax/libs/axios/version/axios.min.js, it has a bunch of JavaScript. Ye sara JavaScript will have a function, have some functions that I can use. So that is why I have imported it over here. This is similar to me going to a Node.js process, me going to a Node.js file and writing const axios equal to require Axios. In Node.js, that is how you require an external library. In case of HTML, CSS and JavaScript, you create a script tag. You create a script tag. You can either do this. Script tag kya karta hai? You can write some JavaScript inside, alert hi, set timeout, or you can say script tag, please run the JavaScript that is present here. You can say यहाँ पे बहुत सारी JavaScript है. There is a lot of JavaScript here. please run all of that on the page. So basically, when you write this line of code, what happens is ये जितनी भी JavaScript यहाँ पे है, all of this JavaScript runs on your page. It is the same as me writing this, a script tag, and इसके अंदर me pasting the whole thing. This is the same as me taking the contents from here and pasting them over here. Okay, it's the same thing. I can either write this or I can take all the contents and paste them over here. What does the contents of this specific library do? They give you access to a method called Axios, which makes your life a little bit easier. It gives you access to this variable called Axios, जहाँ पे you can simply call functions like these. Axios.get the data over here. This is slightly easier to write than this, right? The other one had two methods. Response equal to await, fetch, and you would send the data inside. Then you would specify the method like this. If you don't specify a method, by default it would be get. And then you would do this const data equal to await response.json. This is slightly harder syntax versus Axios simply says, क्या write this logic, मैं खुद उसको JSON में convert कर दूंगा. I'll convert it to JSON by default, which is why if you do console.log response.data, it'll automatically have the data over here. It'll automatically convert it into JSON. That is what this external library does. Just like FS is a library that lets you read from the file system, Axios is a library that lets you, it's an HTTP client, which means it lets you send HTTP request and get back the response. Which is better depends on you. Really depends. Sometimes people use this, some people use this. Whatever you are comfortable with, you can use. This will of course add some extra megabytes to your website because you are bringing some external code. This will not add those extra megabytes, but in some case it is worth it because this is cleaner syntax. So if I had to write the same code using Axios, it would look something like this. One line of code to do this, and then another line of code to do document.get element by ID posts.inner HTML equal to response.data. Whatever. What are the four fields it returns you? User ID, title, and body. Whatever you want over there, you can just put over here. So if I run this, you see the title over here. The syntax is slightly cleaner to digest compared to fetch. So do we understand the difference between Axios and fetch? We also have a video in cohort 2 that does exactly this. It will share the difference between Axios and fetch. So I'm happy to post that video as well. Can we do a quick poll? Do we understand the difference between Axios and fetch? And two ways to send a background request to an HTTP server. 89% is decent, not pretty good actually. So let me quickly recap everything we have done until now and what we are doing next. We have written some very little code. Let's write some more code over here, and we'll see if we can reach middleware today or not. To recap, we did some recap of last week. सबसे पहले we understood a little about last week, specifically all of this jargon right here. And this week we were supposed to cover all of this. Headers, some of us understand, some of us don't. That is fine. We're not going to use them. Fetch API in the browser. Hopefully we understand that you can send a request in the background to a server to get back some data from that. Why do you need that? If you ever create a dynamic website in the future, what is a dynamic website? You keep on scrolling, more data keeps on coming. Then you have to create or have to send these background requests. The next thing we are going to do is we're going to write some code to create our own HTTP server now. And then maybe we'll send some requests here. Maybe let's do that today. And you guys will do it, not me. I will write a little bit of code and all the steps are here. Can you try to create a local HTTP server really quickly? Maybe in the next 5 to 8 minutes. Tab tak I'll answer some questions. But can you create these? Can you do this assignment? If you've gone through last week, this should be simple. If you have not gone through last week, then also there are steps over here. But you will not understand what is happening over here if you did not go through last week. So based on that, please try to do this. For the people who want to do it on Replit, you can do it on Replit. Unless you practice, you will be stuck on this. I understand everything, but I cannot code. So try this for the next 5 minutes, and then we'll go from there. What you have to do is you have to create an HTTP server which has 4 routes. one a multiply route, an add route, a divide route, and a subtract route. And यहाँ पे the user will send request like this कि slash multiply question mark a equal to 1 and b equal to 2. बड़े अजीब से तरीके से, in such a weird way, they will send you the inputs. And what do you have to do on the server? You have to actually multiply these inputs and return the response to the user. So the user in this case should get back 2. If the user sends a request to 7 and 2, they should get back 14. Similarly, have an add endpoint, a divide endpoint, and a subtract endpoint. The thing that you see over here, question mark a equal to 7 and b equal to 2, is what are called query parameters. That is one more thing we had to learn today. It is just one more way for you to send data to the backend. You can send them in the body, but get requests don't have any body, right? If you are sending a get request from the browser, where are you going to specify the body? So if you want to send some data in a get request, you can do it in one of two ways. Either you can send it like this, or you can send it like this. Slash multiply slash 1 slash 2. I want to multiply these two numbers. Or you can send it like this. Here I have two numbers a and b. I am sending them as query parameters. Question is, how can you catch these query parameters on an express server? How can you actually multiply and return the response to the user? Okay? That is the assignment. I will also code this in 5 minutes. But until then, if you have any questions related to the assignments, let me answer them. And for everyone else, just try to do it and code a little, and then I will code as well. Recap fetch API, recap Axios. Let me do that. Just 1 second. Can you share the link of the tool which covers the simplest project? Okay, let me answer some of these doubts. These are all from the old. If response format is like a list of objects and I want to add inner HTML, just 1 second. I need to do something here. All right. If the response is a list of objects, I want to add inner HTML. How can I do this? Okay, great question. Someone said, अगर ऐसे array of objects आ गया, तो मैं क्या करूँगा? How can I take this array of objects and show it over here? Pretty simple, right? You can get the posts from here. It returns you an array of objects. So you can just iterate over them, right? यहाँ पे जो data आया है, response.data is an array. Const arr equal to this thing. For let I equal to 0, I less than arr.length I plus plus. What do you want to do? You want to keep appending to the inner HTML, right? You will take all the posts and keep adding them one by one. If I run this, you will see all the posts over here. Arr of I.title. That is how you can send a request to a backend, get a bunch of posts and render them over here. Now, of course, you want it to be pretty. You want one bullet point below the other. So, you have to do the right DOM manipulation here. You should add a div over here that has, hopefully you get the idea. Okay, plus equal to something like this. If I do this, then you'll see, them first post, second post, third post like this. Someone said, can you explain Axios and fetch again? So both of these, again, we need to first understand the motivation of Axios and fetch. The motivation is if you ever have a website, अगर आपने आज के डेट में facebook.com बनाया, eventually you are going to create websites. Even when you go to app.100devs.com, you see all of these courses. When you click on them, when I click on the first course, the page isn't reloading. I repeat, when I click on the first post over here, ऐसा थोड़ी है कि ये नया पेज खुला, ऐसे refresh थोड़ी हुआ. Did you see a loader come over here when I go back to the landing page? When I go to any course, the page doesn't reload. A background request goes out. If I go back to the landing page, click on inspect, go to the network tab, and I click on any one of these courses, notice a request goes out /7 कि इस course की details चाहिए मुझे. These are all background requests. If you want to create what is called a single page application, what does single page application mean? कि यार ये एक ही page है. This is a single page. You keep going from one sub page to another sub page. All of these requests happen in the background. For that, you need to send background requests. As I'm switching through the course, background requests are going out. When you in the future create your own website like this, how can you send these background requests? The answer is the browser itself says, "Kya ye to bahut common use case hai." The browser itself says that this is a very common use case, and hence the browser introduced something called AJAX. AJAX stands for asynchronous JavaScript or something else. I don't know. Don't quote me on this. Google this and XML. I think it is this only. The browser introduced this. क्या asynchronously JavaScript और XML लाने दो कहीं और से. Let me fetch some. I think it's JSON. I could be wrong, but whatever it is, this specific term AJAX means कि asynchronously let the user fetch data from a backend. What does asynchronously mean? कि page तो load हो गया. The page has been loaded. As the user clicks on buttons, asynchronously fetch some data from the backend so that the front end can be changed based on that. Why processing sorted array faster? So how can you do that if you create your own website? By using either Axios, which is a simpler syntax. What is the syntax? Ekdam simple. Axios.get. Get me all the data over here. Kya data tha yahan pe? If you look at it, this has if you go to /posts, you will have an array of posts. I get that data over here. I get that array in this variable. I iterate over the array and ek karke I start to put them, all the posts over here. That is how I have created my dynamic website. Now, if you want, you can do this. If you want to create something like app.100xsteps.com, you can say, kya ek button hai. The button says fetch latest posts. And when you click on this button, get recent posts gets called. Let me not call it by default. Let me call it जब ये button click होता है. जब ये button click होगा, when this button is clicked, call these posts. Now, if you look at this, initially the website is empty. Very similar to how initially app.100xsteps.com just shows the courses. When I click on a button, so somehow it gets all the contents over here and shows the contents on the screen. Similarly, यहाँ पे when I click on this button now, it sends a request, gets back the response, and renders all of them over here. So the motivation of the Fetch API or the Axios API is to create single page applications like these, to create dynamic applications like these. The one that we have created is कि एक button है, click on the button, only then a request will be sent and some response will be fetched from the server. Cool. Hopefully that makes it a little more clearer. The body HTTP request does not have a body. How to handle this drawback? The get method, so that is a drawback. Whenever you are sending a get request, you cannot send body. आपको कुछ data भेजना है in that case, you can either send it, like this. For example, in this case, if you want to fetch the second post, you will send /post/2. If you want to fetch the third post, you will do it like this. If you want to send somebody, it has to be in a post request. It is a get request, right? Get request में आपको क्या ही specify करना होगा? You don't want to give a very big, I want to update something. It is a get request. So whatever you want to specify, the dynamic things can either be specified like this or be specified as a query parameter like this. Question mark, and उसके आगे first argument is this, and second argument is this, and third argument is this. These are called query parameters. This is just a dynamic route over here. In the assignment, we need to do parsing. That is correct. You can use import syntax instead of require syntax. You will have to change your local, parser to be ES6, and then you're good to go. If you do it by default, it will not work. Node.js will not understand the import syntax. Why res.data.title? Why not res.data? Well, if you put just add of I or res.data, then you will see something like this. A lot of objects. If you do this res json.stringify res.data, then you will see something better. You will see, the first post over here and the second post over here. But this is so ugly to look at, right? I don't want to see this ugly object. I want to see just the body of that specific post, which is why we do arr of I dot body or, res.data dot body. So that I just see the body of the post. I don't want to see, the whole thing. I want to see just this body. All right. 9:20. I think it's time for me to code a little as well. We wanted to create an HTTP server. यहाँ पे what are we doing? We are using someone else's HTTP server. ये तो किसी और ने लिखा है. This is someone else's HTTP server hosted on the internet. The assignment is for us to create our own HTTP server. Last week we discussed how can you do this. The way to do this is firstly create an empty project. Again, all the instructions are here. Create an empty folder. Let me call it Node.js project week 5. Let me initialize an empty package.json. If you remember, what does this command over here do? npm init-y. It initializes a package.json. If I press ls now, I see there is an empty, not empty, but like a package.json over here. Let me open this in Visual Studio Code next. What did I do? Created an empty folder by running this command. Went into that folder. Ran npm init-y, initialize the package.json, and now I am opening this in Visual Studio Code. I've opened this in Visual Studio Code. What is the next step? It is to install Express. Harkiyat, what is Express? We discussed last week. It is a library that lets you do create an HTTP server, similar to how Spring Boot lets you do it in Java. Express lets you do it in JavaScript. Next step is create an index.js file. And now we will start to write our Express ka code. Are we using the FS library today? Are we using the FS library to read some contents from the file, from a file? No, we are not. What is our goal for today? Our goal is to use the Express library. We are going to use the Express library to do what? To create an HTTP server. How do you do that? If you remember from last week, step 1 is you initialize an app variable. You get Express, you import Express from Express, or you require Express from Express, similar to how you would have done const fs equal to require fs. And one extra thing you have to do in case of Express is const app equal to Express. You have to initialize this app variable. The thing that you have over here is a function. The thing that this library gives you by default is a function. You call that function, you get the app instance. And here now we have to specify 4 endpoints, a /sum endpoint, a /multiply endpoint, and 2 more endpoints. You get the idea. Lastly, you listen on a specific port. What does this last line of code do? It starts to listen for incoming requests on the 3000 port. ये basic boilerplate code है. This is very basic boilerplate code. We discussed last week. You should know generally. This code initializes an HTTP server. Just how this JSON placeholder.typecode.com /posts/4 gives you some data. Similarly, we are writing the code कि जो हमारी वेबसाइट होगी, our website /sum, whenever someone comes here, the request will come over here, and यहाँ पे we will return them some data. That is what we are doing when we are writing this Express code. Again, we discussed this last week. I would urge you to go back if you don't understand this. When you're writing Express code, you get access to a request object and a response object. This, as the name suggests, is a request object, which means it has all the data related to your request. User जहाँ आपको request भेज रहा है, they are sending you the request to /sum, let's say, and we said we want them to specify you some data. What numbers they want to add, A and B. They are giving you A is 1 and B is 2. This sum function needs to sum A and B and return it. How can you get access to A and B over here? Const A equal to, how do I get access to the variables that the user sent in the request? The answer is you can get access to query parameters by doing rec.query.a and b equal to rec.query.b. Given you have A and B, What data do we need to return to the user? What is the answer? The answer is a plus b, right? This is the sum endpoint. It is supposed to take two inputs, sum them up, and return them to the user. That is exactly what this code over here does. Let's ignore everything else. Let's see, does it work? If I run node index.js, notice this doesn't exit out. It constantly is running something. It is constantly listening to port 3000 over here. And if I go to localhost :3000 /sum (a equal to 1 and b equal to 2), it returns me 12. It should have returned me 3, but it returned me 12 for some reason. We'll get to what that reason is. What is a plus b? What is 1 plus 2? It is 3 ideally, but it returned me 12 over here. We'll get to why that is. Let's introduce another endpoint, or just change this endpoint to be multiply. We don't support sum anymore, we support multiply. What would the answer be in this case? It would be a into b. Let me restart the server. Let me go to the multiply endpoint. What is 1 into 2? It is 2. That is exactly what the server returns. What is 2 into 200? It is 400. That is exactly what the server returns. So just how this returns you some posts, specifically this returns you the post number 2. If I go to /3, it returns you the post number 3. We have created our own HTTP server, which takes two inputs, A and B, and returns their multiplication. If you multiply A and B, this multiplication now happens on our server. Over here, we return this answer to the user. Let's do a poll and see how many already understand this. Simple. Did you understand this? I would assume not a lot of people. So don't worry if you don't. Oh, you do understand this. I'm so confused. Okay, great. Either the people who don't understand left, or this was easy. Either way, great. So what was the total assignment then? The assignment was to add all 4 of these functions. Were you able to add them? Hopefully it's fairly simple, create 4 such endpoints. The only catch over here was this A and B are usually strings. Not usually, when the user sends you some data, they can send you B equal to Harkirat. So these A and B, even though you wrote numbers over here, what comes over here is, 1, and what comes over here is 2. So when you add 1 plus 2, it becomes 12. When you add 2 strings, they get added as strings and not as numbers. So the only thing you have to do is, there's this function called parse int in Node.js that lets you, as the name suggests, parse a string as an integer. So whatever inputs we get, rec.query.a and rec.query.b, we parse them as numbers and then return it. Now if you run it and go to the add endpoint, it will return you the right thing. 1 plus 4 equal to 4. Sorry about that. 1 plus 4 equal to 5. 1 plus 4 equal to 5. It is not returning me 14 anymore. Why? Because I parsed the inputs to a number. And you can add the 4 endpoints here, subtract, multiply. What is tricky, and if you're looking for an assignment, is how can you do this? The user needs to send us inputs like this now. /add /1/2 /add /10/20. How can the user specify inputs like this and not like this? Can you figure that out? How can the user specify inputs as 2 dynamic routes? 10 is dynamic. It can be 10, it can be 20, it can be 30. The second endpoint is also dynamic. How can we change the HTTP server to accept inputs like this? Can you guess? Let me give you, the answer of this already, but the way to create dynamic endpoints in Express is /:a/:b. What this will do is, any request that comes to /add /anything will be handled by this guy. I repeat, what this route handler now says, koi bhi request that is coming on /add /anything, the colon over here means, doesn't matter what is over here, I will still catch this request if there are 2 dynamic things after this. That is how you create the route handler. And the way you get the actual argument is rec.params.a for the first one and rec.params.b for the second one. If I wrote this as first arg, then I would have to do rec.params dot first arg over here, and second argument or second arg, then rec.params dot second arg. That is how you can create a different kind of a dynamic get endpoint. You can either take the dynamic parts in the route itself, or you can take the dynamic parts as query parameters. Really depends on you. Now if I rerun this and go to /add/30/50, notice it returns 80 because this /add/anything/anything/add/anything, the colon here means anything/anything gets caught over here. And the way you get the first argument is by rec.params.first_arg. And the second one is rec.params.second_arg. Hopefully that's simple enough. Cool. 9:30. We were about to get into a very interesting and difficult concept next called middlewares. And everything afterwards is middlewares, but I don't think we should. It's 9:30 already. I will just take a few questions, we'll call it. How did you guys understand everything? How many of you understood everything? Of course, we weren't able to reach here, but everything else were you able to understand? Yes or no? Okay, the number is slowly inching towards 90%. Okay, now slowly going down. Okay, I guess the people who don't understand anything come at the end. Cool. It is at 85%, which is good, not great, considering this should be easy. Middlewares are hard. Everything before that is supposed to be easy. So, for everyone who understood it for the 85%, kudos. And feel free to drop off now. I'll take a small doubt session for 30 minutes for the 15%. So the 100 people that are here, please ask any questions, and we'll try to answer them, because if you don't understand until this point, middlewares are going to be a pain in the ass. This is going to be like super hard. So let's try to answer a few questions. We'll go from there. Everyone else, thank you. I will see you guys tomorrow. We'll cover middlewares tomorrow. And if you already understood everything, here are some simple assignments. Let's see. I had more assignments here. I think I removed them. But these are the 2 simple assignments that you can do. And if you are looking for a hard assignment, we had one last week, which was creating a to-do server using file system. So file system based to-do server. Google this a little bit, you'll understand what it is. Basically a to-do server minus a database, or create the backend of a to-do application without the database. This was the assignment last week, so you can do that. With that, thank you everyone for joining. For the 15%, so only people who did not understand any specific question I can help answer. Where are you guys stuck? I'm looking at Q&A. The project is incomplete. So where to write code of fetch in backend or front end? Ideally in front end, but you write it in backend as well. Sometimes backends talk to backends as well. So what does the fetch API do? The fetch API lets you fetch data from an HTTP server. If this is a backend server of yours and this is your browser, so most of the times you will be sending a request from the browser to a backend server. But a lot of times multiple backend servers also talk to each other. Don't get into this. It's a very hard thing, at least right now. But yes, this happens. Sometimes you use fetch on the server as well. Most of the times, at least right now, we'll be using it on the client. I don't understand the part of the fetch API. Explain the header. Where will we write the code of fetch, frontend or backend, sir? What is /something? What is that called? It's called a route. /anything is called a route. We discussed this last week. Why can't we use Axios like this? Because require doesn't run in the browser as such. You can create what are called modules and do that. But wait till we reach React, and over there, you'll be able to do what you want to do here. Headers and okay, so people are mostly worried about headers. So let's get into headers first. The best way to understand headers is authentication and authorization only. So let me do this again. Here I am on Google Chrome. I go to app.100xdevs. Sorry, I go to google.com. Can you see on the top right the Harkirat icon? The HTML that came back when I went to google.com. This is my browser. I went to google.com. क्या मैंने यहाँ पे कहीं भी लिखा? Did I write at all? Username equal to Harkirat, 96@gmail.com and password equal to something. No, I simply went to google.com. That was all that my input was. So the question is कि how did google.com know कि ये हरकीरत है? Why did in the HTML that it returned me, उसके top right पे, how does it have my profile icon? How does it have it here? I तो only said कि I want to go to google.com. This is the Google server. It received my request. How did it know कि हरकीरत is the person who is sending the request? The answer is browser ने silently भेज दिया in a header. The browser silently sent my username and password in the browser. When you go to a website and sign up, right? Whenever you sign in, if this is your Gmail sign in page, username, password, and then a sign up button or a sign in button, let's say. Whenever you click on sign in, आपका browser ना assume कर लो, for now assume, your browser sort of stores this information somewhere. Your username, password. This doesn't actually happen, so don't say this anywhere in an interview. But ठीक है, for now assume your browser stores this somewhere in your browser when you sign in for the first time. And उसके बाद anytime I go to google.com, the browser attaches this username and password in the headers. If this is the URL that I'm going to, it will silently attach my username and password in the headers. That way, Google will know अच्छा ये हरकीरत है, and Google will return this profile section on the top right. That is the goal of headers. Okay, the user did not say कि मैं google.com पे, the Google user only said I wanted to go to their landing page. User only specified that much. Any extra metadata मतलब whatever is not related to the original request. Original request यहाँ क्या है? Give me the landing page of Google. If I search for something random here, the request is give me the search response of this search. That is the main data. What is the metadata? Things like my username and password. So when I go to google.com, when I press enter over here, the first request that goes out, इसमें, if you look at it, I only specified google.com. I did not send any data over here along with it. I did not send any data. But there are some request headers that get attached by default. Your browser does that. Browser को पता है वो कि if your user has signed in, it stores them somewhere, it sends them with every request. Specifically, the one that the browser sends is this cookie. ये जो cookie है ना, think of this like my username and password. Because I sent this cookie, Google understood ये हरकीरत है, and in the HTML that it returned, if I go to response over here, in the HTML, बड़ा सा जो इन्होंने HTML दिया है, इस HTML में it put me in the top right यहाँ पे कि हाँ ये हरकीरत का account है. So that is why you use headers. You use it for extra metadata. Now in this case we did not specify it. If I go to Postman, then I can specify my headers as well कि यार मुझे ये username भेजना है, password भेजना है, कुछ और भेजना है, तो the browser attaches a lot of them by default, and the others, if you're using something like Postman, you can specify them yourself also. In fact, if I go to Replit, whenever you're sending a fetch request, then also you can specify them. Whenever you are sending a fetch request, if I go to, whatever, axios.get, here I can specify the headers like this, cookie, and send some data along, and some other random cookie header that I might want to send. Similarly, in fetch, whenever I send a fetch request to some endpoint, I can specify the headers like this. So headers are just one more extra data you can send. I gave you so many ways to send data to a backend. If this is a backend and you want to specify some dynamic data to it, you can do it either number one in the route itself, /API/post/1. Here one is the dynamic data. You can do it in the body. Body का मतलब क्या है? You can send some JSON data that looks something like this. Post ID 2 and title. This is my tweet. If you are sending a request to, let's say, Twitter to create a fresh tweet. I gave you a third way, which is headers, which is used for metadata, any extra data that is not associated to the primary request, something that gets attached to every request, some common data जो हर request के साथ जा ही रहा है, that is what is sent in the headers. And the other way I gave you was query parameters. Okay, when you are sending a request, slash API slash posts question mark post ID equal to 1. So these are 4 ways you can send the data to a backend. अब तुम पे है भाई, if you want to only use body. For a get request, body doesn't work. So for a get request, if you want to use query parameters, use query parameters. If you want to use a route, use the route. That really depends on the backend developer. कि backend developer कैसा code लिख रहा है. Have they written code like this? Or have they written code like this? In this case, they would expect the user to give you, a query param. So slash add question mark a equal to 1 and b equal to 2. But if the developer, changes it to params, then, it would expect the user to send a request to slash add slash 1 slash 2. Cool. All right. Let's look at more Q&A. Previous topics, you have to go through the recordings. If you've just joined today, where we write the code to fetch in the backend or the front end. I answered that. Both the places, but for now, just the front end. So middleware will be taken tomorrow, yes. Instead of directly fetching, can we use a button and add an on-click function when we fetch and display the data? Yeah, I just added that, right? Bhanu something is your name. I exactly did that. I added a button. When you click on the button, we send a request that fills the data. That code is over here. I've added a button. When you click on this button, we call get recent posts, and that actually gets the recent posts. In the middleware assignment for today, is it okay to use extract timestamp for getting the timestamp of the request? You can do that. You can also use the date class that will give you the timestamp. Can you please show us how to pass A and B as parameters again? As parameters, yes. /:A::B. Any request that comes to slash add slash a dynamic route slash another dynamic route will be caught here. And the way to get this argument is rec.params.a. The way to get this argument is rec.params.b. Chewing glass. If this is chewing glass, then boy oh boy, the next few weeks are going to be very tough for you, sir. Why assignments are not uploaded to GitHub? Please upload it for the last post where we can refer to it. Sounds good. We will. Please check out, sir. The project is okay. Let me answer all questions related to the class, and then I'm happy to look at others. How LinkedIn know in the end DOM and fetches new data? Oh, that, there are event handlers. Okay. Something like this. Document.onScroll to end equal to function. There'll be some event handler like this. Okay, when the user has reached the bottom of the screen, then you send, whatever fetch request to send your data to the backend. Why are we using response.data? What does data mean here? So for Axios, in Axios, if you are using Axios, Kangya, then this response.data field is what contains the final data. Response has a bunch of things like the status code. Response.status code will have the status code of the request. Response.headers will have the headers of the request. Response.data will have the actual data of the, the underlying data that came in this specific thing. So, that is why we have to do response.data, because response has a bunch of things. तुमने इसको hit किया, you might want to just check the status code. You might want to just check the headers. So that is why this is a more complex object. And if you just want the data, you can do response.data. How to render a data generated in Express to the front end? Easiest way is this, right? Data that is generated in Express, you can hit that specific endpoint. You can get that response. You can just shove that response in the DOM. That is one way. Another way is by using something called templating engines like EJS. Don't worry about this. No one uses them now. Before React, these were used, and this is one more way to do, what you're asking. But this is the way you want to use. Send a request to that HTTP endpoint, get the response, shove that in the DOM. HTTP server, once again, how to create. Go to last week's video. We have covered this in fair detail. Everyone, 90-95% were able to understand how can you create an HTTP server. So last week's video, go to the end where we cover how you can create an HTTP server using Express. Git GitHub, I'll release a video. We're currently sending the request to localhost, but how will I get a URL for this API? Suppose I want to run it locally like this. How to have this? Then I can run my app on localhost 3000 and the front end and use Axios fetch from data. Okay, I guess your question is, but we're running fetch for the localhost. How will I get a URL for this API? Suppose I want to host it locally. /API question this thing. How will I have this and run it on my app localhost 3000 at the front end, which uses Axios? Okay, that comes over here. Let me go to the slides. That is exactly what we cover over here. If you go to the last slide, I say let's create an HTTP server. You understand this. You understand how to create this. I say create an index.html file, a simple index.html file. Then I say serve this HTML file by running npx serve. Now serve, serve, is another npm module that, as the name suggests, lets you serve static files. What does this npm module let you do? Serve helps you serve a static site, which is exactly what we have. This HTML over here is nothing but a static file. So just follow the steps over here. Step 1, create an HTTP server and start it on port, let's say 3000. Step 2, create an index.html file that sends a request to localhost 3000, but at the same time, is running on a different port. Here you will face CORS issues, which is exactly what this slide covers, and how you can fix them a little better. So we'll understand this tomorrow. But if you want to go through this, feel free to, you can do what you want to do, but which is, host the front end and back end locally, but you will face cross origin resource sharing issues, CORS issues. We'll understand what those are and how you can fix them tomorrow. All right. So bhaiya, should we write headers? So should we have to write headers in real code? Most of the times you don't have to. We will, when we write our very first MERN stack application, you will see we will just write one header from time to time. Others you don't worry about. You don't worry about headers too much. When we reach Next.js, you will not be writing them at all. When we create a simple MERN stack application right now, we'll be writing one header only, no more. My coding speed is too slow to face difficulty in building logic, resulting in termination of my first internship in only 3 weeks. And also afraid to apply to another internship. Yeah, don't apply yet. First practice a lot and then apply. What is the question here on LazyVim? When do we use JSON.parse and stringify? I've been using this a lot in my project. I will share this very soon. Forgot to register on Super. Hackathon project is ready, but register. Can you? Yeah, it's opening. It will open today, and feel free to add it. I'll increase the timings until 2nd of September. So parse and stringify are used like this. If I open the console and start to write some code now, let x equal to a string that looks something like this. Name Harkirat. Okay. Even though this is an object, I've put it inside a string. So what do you think x ka type kya hai? When I do a console.log x, this is a string. I can't do x.name. If I do x.name, it says undefined. If I do type of x, it says it is string. If I want to do x.name, I will first parse it. I will say const y equal to json.parse x. I will say, is this incorrect JSON? This might be invalid JSON. Let me try that one more time. Let x equal to, let's do this. Name Harkirat. Okay. This is hopefully valid JSON. Let y equal to json.parse x. Let z equal to json.parse x. And now z is an actual object. X is a string. If you notice, x के आगे कोई ये नहीं है. This triangle is not in front of x because this is a string. This is an object. I can do z.name. It will give me Harkirat. If I do x.name, it gives me undefined. Why? Because x is a string. Even though it looks like a JavaScript object, it isn't a JavaScript object. इसका type क्या है? What is type of x? It is a string. Exactly why. I cannot do x.name. Z.name I can do because what is the type of z? It is an object. So JSON.parse is used to convert a string over to an object. JSON.stringify is the opposite, used to convert an object to a string. तो अगर आपके पास object है, आपको उसे string में convert करना है, आप JSON.stringify यूज करोगे. अगर आपके पास string है, आपको उसे object में convert करना है, you'll use JSON.parse. They're the opposites of each other. One is used to convert string to object, other is used to convert object to string. Cool. Q&A. Explain line 30. Can you please explain line 35? This line, this is for a more complicated use case. So if you don't understand it, it is fine. Someone asked, Yaar Harkirat, what if you get an array of posts? Abhi tak we were seeing this /post/1. It returns a single post. Someone said, what if you hit /posts, which returns all of these posts? So for that, after we get the data, we iterate over the data. We run a for loop for first this guy, then this guy, then this guy. And inside the for loop, we say for let I equal to 0, I less than array.length I plus plus. Document.getElement by ID posts. ये जो posts div है, this div, dot inner HTML, to its inner HTML, add this thing right here. What does plus equal to mean? It means to this, or let me make this slightly simpler for you. It means something like this. Okay, take the inner HTML, to it add the original, have the original inner HTML and add a div which has the body of that specific element and then /div. This is the body of the first div, this is the body of the second div. That is exactly what you end up seeing over here. Body of the first div, body of the second div, body of the third div. So that is what this for loop over here does. All right. Can we drop? I don't see this page, Avinash. Why are we using await with fetch and Axios? Can we drop await with Axios? No. Doesn't matter if you use Axios or fetch. The thing that you are doing here is asynchronous in nature. It is a network request. When I press enter over here, do you see a loader? It doesn't immediately come. If I am on a bad internet, this will take 20 seconds. So this is an asynchronous operation, an operation that doesn't immediately resolve, which is why you do need to await it, irrespective of if you use fetch or Axios. I've created a backend service for to do. Please. This looks good. I don't think I have the mental capacity to review right now, but create a very fancy one and dazzle me on Twitter, and hey, then I might look at it. I tried multiply, but also not getting answer. I just get concatenated string. I use parse int. Multiply me, you shouldn't need that only. Your logic is wrong most probably. If you have a /multiply endpoint, you most probably have some, paste your code. I'm sure you are missing something obvious. Here you don't even need to parse ints because multiplication on a string is fine. If you multiply a string that is 2 with a string that is 2, it will still return you 4. So, it will return you a string that is 4, but that is fine. Plus may it becomes a problem. When you add them, it becomes 22. If you multiply them, you don't even need to parse int. So there is some other bug in your code and not this. So just paste your code and happy to look at it. All right. Difference in promise and Axios. Okay. Promise versus Axios is the same as Java versus Python. They are very different things. You can't really compare them. Axios is a library, just like Express is a library, FS is a library. Axios is a library. Promise is a class. Very different things. This promise class is used for asynchronous operations. This Axios library, pay when you call axios.get on a specific endpoint, let's say, returns a promise. So it is more like Axios, जिसने लिखा है, whoever has written Axios has written a function called get, which returns a new promise. Whoever has written const Axios equal to this. Whoever has written the Axios library has written a get function inside it so that you can do axios.get. And what does this return you? Const x equal to this thing. It returns you a promise. So Axios is an external library. You use this external library. What does external library mean, Harkirat? It means that you are sending a request. You have to bring it to your code base. This library is not part of the web browser. You have to bring it to your code base, which means, yahan pe, if you actually open this code, something like this is written. Okay, const axios equal to get, which under the hood returns a promise, which if you can guess already, under the hood actually sends a fetch request only. I repeat, under the hood it will send a fetch request only. Something like this. So if you really look at it, all of this code that is present on axios.min.js looks something like this. This code is the Axios library. This code is the Axios library. It returns you a promise. This get method over here returns you a promise. That is the very significantly different things. Just an opinion. It is a good opinion. People are just very hard to get consensus in this, but what your opinion is very good. The learning videos should be kept offline. An intermediate can directly jump to assignments, while a beginner can rewatch if they face difficulties, and keep doubt sessions on Friday, Saturday and Sunday where we can clear our doubts. This can save a lot of time and help learn more. Beautiful advice. Ideally, but the world isn't ideal. So we will do a poll, and at least for Web3 we might do this, because whatever is happening on Web3 is this on steroids. I would assume because there's not a lot of content to read about Web3. Yeah, but people are somehow able to follow along. By the end, we're able to reach 90-95%. But so we'll see. We'll do a poll. It is good advice, I know, but as I said, the world isn't ideal. Some people do want live. So yeah. All right. How do I secure my personal info in transit or any network request in form, cookies, any other headers? Is there any other solution except encrypted forms? No. So you don't have to worry about that. Of course, Google is not dumb enough to send your username and password. I said that, but actually what goes, this is the Google server. What is going from your browser to the Google server is actually a cookie, and this cookie, yes, you need to keep it very safe, which is why I wasn't showing it to you. But this cookie doesn't have your username and password. So even if you get it, you will be able to temporarily log in as me. But if I invalidate the cookie, if I log out, it will go away. So the cookie doesn't have my username and password. It has some token. We will be getting to this very soon. I would have originally thought a week, but maybe 2 weeks, and learn about JWTs. And then, after we learn about JWTs, this will become a little bit easier to understand. And, it is all sent over HTTPS. If I'm going to google.com, the protocol here is HTTPS. So, only Google can see it and I can see it. No one in the middle can capture my, cookie. All right. I think we're going on. I don't think people need any questions. Please verify it once. Until which week will I be able to create a project and apply for a job? 15 के बाद हो जाता भाई, I think. In this case, maybe 20 because we're going a little slower. This looks good. Save data. ID. To-dos.length. This might screw you up, sir. Yeah. There is a bug here. Can you guess what the bug is? There is a bug here. अरे का इंडेक्स लिया कितना तक डिलीट करना है और वह हाँ yeah, can you guess what the bug is? Let's see. Let me copy this code and bring it locally. If I run this and let's say I send a request to save data, I send the first request here, okay, to send a to do. Localhost 3000 / save dash data. And I say the title of the to do is go to gym. I send the request. It says data saved successfully. If I look at a.txt, it has ID 0. Sorry, to do. I send another one, go to gym again, and now it has ID 0. Let me put some to do here. To do eat food. I have these two over here. Iski ID 0 है, iski ID 1 है. Let me send another one. Now I have 3. ID 0, ID 1 and ID 2. Okay, I have these 3. Now let me send a request to delete to do. This looks wrong. What the fuck? Okay, this is a little weird. Okay, makes sense. So, okay. So, why is this route slash delete to do slash ID? It should just be delete to do, right? Just out of, it doesn't matter either way. Delete to do slash ID. Question mark param equal to, let's say 1. This is very weird. It should be slash delete to do. Question mark ID equal to something. Param kya hota hai, You get the idea. The names are very bad. It's like me writing delete it over here. What is it? This is very descriptive. Okay, delete to do. But this is not descriptive. Okay, param equal to 1. It should be ID equal to 1. And you don't need this last route. But okay, I send a delete request. Kya delete the to do with ID number 1. Okay, delete this to do. And it doesn't get deleted because it is a delete request. Can you guess already what the error is? Data delete successfully. Data saved successfully. If I go here, iski ID 0 hai, iski ID 2 hai. Everything is fine. Now let me create another one. Are there 2 to-dos which have the same ID now? Yes, there are. Is that a problem? There is a problem, right? ID ka matlab hi hota hai identifier. And the way that you have written your code, you can put in 2 to-dos with the same ID. So that is the bug. I hope you get how the bug comes, and solution is also straightforward. Randomly generate IDs, or make sure the ID doesn't already exist. Your ID generation logic will kick you in the butt when you delete a to-do and recreate one. You get 2 to-dos with the same ID. Now when the user sends delete to-do, which one will you delete? This one or this one, or both of them? So IDs should always be unique. Cool. Why to find tech stack website using UI? How to find the tech stack? It's not too difficult to understand, at least the front end. Back end also, you'll find, for example, I don't know, this might have changed, but any website that you're looking at, let's try to open a random, let's say finance with Sharan website. I go to this random website. I sign in. To pay. Community Soch Mohak Mangal. Let's say I go to this website and I start to inspect their backend. So for the front end, it's basically looking at these classes. A lot of times these classes will look a certain way, so it's using Tailwind. If they look a different way, it's a little easy to understand that they use MUI. Or otherwise you just have to, aapko kya dekhna hai? Let's say this is the website you want to understand. Then you will just go to this login with to continue button, try to see what styles does it have, and inspect the CSS over here. Margin top iski 56 hai, outline iski ye hai, background color iska ye hai. And based on this you can copy the styles of this if that is your goal. The other thing is the backend. So for the backend, you can go to the network tab and see where are all the requests going out. Refresh the page. You will see, search for API. You will see a few requests to, let's say, for example, API dot whatever this is. And if I go over here to a random endpoint, it says now not found right now. I was hoping it would give me something like this. Cannot get slash. If the endpoint returns you something like this, so can you guess the backend is Express? Yeah, right. Express may, if you go to a route that is not handled, is not getting handled correctly, it returns you something like this. You can, catch this and return something like not found as well. You can also, if we really want, we can go over here, refresh, and see if response headers may somewhere we see Express. So that is how you slowly try to debug. This says Nginx, so yeah, it will be very hard for us to tell what they're using under the hood. But that is one of many ways you try to inspect the backend. And if someone's looking for some bounty, there are a few bugs here. I'm not saying anything, but there might be a few bugs here. So feel free to try them out. Someone reported this a few days ago. So I didn't find some of these. Some of these were found by someone else. Right from the landing page, you'll find some bugs in case you're curious. You may or may not find some bugs. I don't know actually. All right, let's see. There are more doubts. Sorry, I'm going to scroll down to the end. Okay, a few GitHub. Please check this one. Oh, great. This looks good. Very, very good. Week 04, assignment solutions. Very nice. We should somehow get this in so that other people can also, benefit from it. So let me again bookmark this. Someone from the team will get in touch and, let's go from there. All right, a few Notion docs. Let me try to answer some of these for 5 minutes and we'll call it. Feedback is always appreciated. So let's look at this one. I'm complete beginner in web development. Started to learn from scratch with your course. In complete last week's assignment, store the data in external JSON. Code is provided below. One thing I did on my own is that I learned about the fetch API through MDN docs and connected the front end to do application in the back end because I am complete beginner, encouraged by some errors, learned some concepts like perfect. However, since everything is set up locally, I can only say it this way. That is fine. This looks good and this is great. This is how you should learn and run ahead of the class. If you would have done last week's assignments like this guy did, you already would have known about cores and fetch and how can you use them. This is the perfect way to learn. This specific person in maybe another 5 to 6 weeks, even though they started, what did they say? Complete beginner in web development. I can still say, if they follow the same path as they are right now, maybe another 10 weeks, that's 2 months, they'll become fairly self-sufficient. And uske baad they can figure things out on their own, as long as they're on the right, keep doing the same thing. So this is exactly how you should be learning. And not be waiting, what is coming next week. At least the assignment that is given, try to do that. Okay. Bookmark. But again, this depends on a lot of factors, but let's see. Teaching everything easy to me, although it's my first time. So should I learn, explore more things? Yes. Do the assignments. Now we're at a point where you can create backends. So create more complicated backends. Already start to, kitna hi bach gaya bhai? You only need to do MongoDB after this. Then you can start to create your own full stack applications. They'll not be the best tech stack, but MongoDB with DOM and dynamic front ends, you can already start to build. And maybe decentish CSS to style them. So yes, you should do more if this seems easy. That's great to know. Great to know a lot of beginners are able to follow along this time. It was not the case for one or even go to two from time to time. All right, more projects. We'll just call it in 2 more minutes, guys. I'm not really reviewing projects. People just send them, so I'm just trying to see if I can find anything that's interesting, areas of improvement. All right, I've opened a few docs. I'm just going to, go through them and then answer. This one seems interesting. This one is closed, so ask Kirat. Hi, this is Himanshu again. Hi, here is the working of the project Soul Bounty. Okay, let's see. Okay, this is the same one, I think. Yes. I mean, okay, let's see. Connect. Okay, this is good. Sign in. Okay, this is good. And then you can create a bounty and explore bounties. Okay, create a bounty. Okay. You authorize. Then you sign in a message. Okay, this is, I'm assuming, the other side. Send bounty directly from PR page. Before sending, the contributors and sender both should be registered on Soul Bounty dashboard. Okay, both of them are, let's say, registered. And then, good to me, here's a bounty for you, sir. You see a bounty button. You select the amount. You confirm, and I'm assuming this directly reaches the other person. Do we see some sort of a comment? There you go. Recent earners is this. Looks fairly decent. And a comment on the PR or an issue might also be good, so everyone can see it. But either way, okay, the other way is for you to create it separately. Create a bounty like this, which doesn't yet debit the money. It just adds, the amount. Okay, I'm pretty decent. Yeah, this works. Might require some tweaking to productionize it, but this is good. To do server, let's see if yours has any bug. What is happening here? Okay, why the semicolon? Probably for no reason. And here you empty the file. This sort of takes away the point of creating a file though, right? हम लोग फाइल क्यों बना रहे हैं? Why are we putting data in the file? To persist data. And what are you doing here? Whenever the application starts, you clear the file again. Then what is the point of storing data in a file? Just store it in a variable only, no? The whole point of storing it in a file is so that if your Node.js app crashes and you restart it, your data is still there. Your data is persisted. It is almost acting like a database. But if you delete everything at the top of the file, then you don't even need to store it in a file. Then store it in a variable over here. That variable will itself, get lost when the process dies. So that's step one. And this is good again for you. So you wrote, this is get, my bad. How are you generating IDs? I mean, that's one, potential bug I saw on the other person. So I'm just trying to see. Yeah, here you're just taking the ID from the user as an input, I'm assuming. You don't generate the ID, you simply take this to do and push it over there. So okay. This will also have the same problem, right? What if the user sends you two tasks with the same ID? I guess you can say that's the user's problem, but this is, you can write it. I'm just trying, this is great, basically, this is the first time you're coding. I'm just trying to find flaws for no reason at all. If I'm being honest, good. This is good only, but hopefully you get the problems and try to fix them. Review. By last week assignment to do done using Express. Did I use memory? Feeling comfortable Express now. Great. Perfect. And I build in memory Express using to do app. That's great as well. Try to do the file system one as well. And for this guy, looks decent. Oh, nice. The first time seeing someone create a local password as well. Nice. That's not the worst thing in the world. This is actually pretty good. Request airdrop. How do I log out? When does it re-ask for my password? It's good. Pretty good. Transactions also showing. Nice. And this guy. This though is very, very good actually. And you should add multiplayer to it as well. You will become, it's pretty good. I try adding multiplayer over here. By which I mean, if I go to two tabs, I should see, or do you already have it? You don't yet, but it's pretty easy to add. Every object here should just be an entry in a JSON and just sync it to other tabs. That would be nice. What else? By the way, it looks pretty close to Excel draw, so yeah, it's pretty good. Yep. Eraser doesn't seem to be working. And this is cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Baki sab to sahi hai. I would love to see the code as well if you could have pointed me to it. And one more guy created the same thing. Don't submit this on the hackathon. It's like something everyone is creating now, right? What is that? Oh, nice. Don't summon this for the hackathon, but yeah, this is convert this into an extension and you have a real wallet. Doesn't let you create more accounts though, it seems. It just creates a new seed phrase only. How can I create one? It doesn't matter either way. Okay, you get the idea. You can add more things to this if need be. But okay, we will call it here. Thank you everyone for joining. I will see you guys tomorrow where we understand middlewares and then we go from there. Slightly slower class, but let's see if we can pick up the pace eventually. With that, let's end it. I will see you guys tomorrow. Good night. Okay, let's say good night, but let me try my best to answer a few more docs and then I'll just call it. I'll do an abrupt stop to the class. All right. Notion doc number 1, check. Okay, I will bookmark this. Doc number 1, check. Okay, I will bookmark this. And can we use server memory as cache instead of Redis? Yes, we actually do that in app.redis.com. it is feasible, depends on how big your cache is. If it becomes really big, then you'll run out of memory. Just make sure that doesn't happen. What happens if all cryptocurrency miners suddenly shut down? Well, you're screwed. Won't happen realistically, but yes, if it does happen, if everyone gets shut down, blockchain will stop creating transactions for a while, then everyone will come back up. They still have all the historic data. Your question should be, what if all miners shut down and their data gets corrupted? In that case, currency is gone forever. But then also, that the same logic applies to banks then, bhai. What if every bank ka server, HDFC Bank ka server ka data gets corrupted? Then what happens to your HDFC Bank balance? Then it goes down to zero. In fact, Bitcoins are enough. Thousands of machines are running that logic. For HDFC Bank, it's probably running in 3 data centers. If all 3 of those data centers have a nuclear attack, then all of your HDFC Bank balances are stored nowhere. They're all gone. There are backups so that doesn't happen, but you still get the idea. Blockchains are more safer in this aspect compared to a simple Web2 bank. How would this impact cryptocurrency ecosystem in blockchain? The same impact as if HDFC goes down today. Code review request. Yesterday created the hard assignment. Please review. Okay. I will not review this right now, but I will bookmark this. Feedback needed on code quality and correctness. Well, the first thing is this is a good PR. Adds Solana payment functionality. But the problem is how you built it, because payment verification is hard. So I don't know how you've built it. I will have to look at this. Basically, I'm not sharing my screen. Basically, you've built this way. How have you done payment verification? If someone sends someone payments, how do you know if they have indeed done it? And in what you are doing is send tokens. You create a transaction.success, payment successful, and then handle submit. What does handle submit does? It sends a request here. So this is a very clear security issue, right? You have an open endpoint over here where the user can send the creator ID and the input link. This payment verification needs to happen on the backend. I don't know if you understood what I meant here, but आप client पे check कर रहे हो. On the client, you are checking, has the payment been done? If it has been done, you are calling this endpoint. On the server, are you ever checking, the user, the thing that you're trying to do, which is, abruptly stop the current streams and replace it with this one? The server needs to check, is this payment indeed done? Otherwise, I can just call this endpoint directly, right? Without actually making the payment. So the payment verification needs to happen on the backend. I don't think you are doing that. Also, you are still calling this endpoint. You need to create a new endpoint that interrupts the stream, and basically you've missed a few things here. I hope you already understood what I meant. All right. And my teammate has made finish generate wallet. Sign up. We've used basic link-based bounty where bounties given can only be claimed by the user who logs into our website. This is actually a good approach. This is the approach that TipLink initially took. This was our approach till now, but now we've decided it's not secure, as wallets details of user is stored in the database. So we want to make an extra step where you approve the bounty. Let's say at the end of the day, you'll just pay the total amount through your wallets and the bounties. Your original approach was not bad, which is attaching money to GitHub accounts, and whenever a user comes and signs up on your platform, they can claim that bounty. That is a very clean approach. Even though yes, there is a centralized backend that is storing the balances, for now it's fine. So which approach should we go for? I should go for the first approach. When a user is assigned a bounty, if they're already signed up on the platform, they can claim that bounty. If not, the bounty keeps on getting stacked. Whenever they sign up on a platform, they can claim that bounty. This I already saw. Middleware assignment looks good. That looks right. And that's fun. All right, guys. Now we'll call it for real. I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good night. Bye-bye.